Ancient Viking graves and mysterious rune stones in Denmark still whisper secrets of lost kings, forgotten rituals, and the rise of a nation. On a windy hill in northern Denmark, hundreds of stone shapes cover the ground like silent shadows from another world. Some form circles, others look like ships frozen in stone. From above, the place almost seems unreal, as if an entire lost civilization left behind messages nobody fully understands anymore. This is Lindholm Hoje, one of the most mysterious Viking burial sites in Scandinavia. At first glance, it looks peaceful. Quiet grass stretches across the hill while the wind moves in from the Limfjord nearby. But beneath that calm surface lies a place connected to death, ritual, fire, and memory for more than 1,000 years. Every stone here marks a story that vanished long ago. And the deeper archaeologists explored Lindholm Hoje, the stranger the site became. The hill contains hundreds of graves from both the Viking Age and the earlier Germanic Iron Age. That means people used this place for burials across many generations, possibly for centuries. Families returned here again and again, burying their dead on the same hill overlooking the water. Why this exact place mattered so much remains one of the biggest mysteries. The location itself feels important. Lindholm Hoje sits high above the Limfjord, giving a clear view across the surrounding land and sea routes. In ancient times, this area would have been full of movement. Viking ships crossing the water, traders arriving from distant lands, smoke rising from settlements nearby. The hill would have been visible from far away, and perhaps that visibility was the point. The dead here were not hidden. They were meant to be remembered. What makes Lindholm Hoje truly unforgettable are the stone formations. Many graves are outlined using stones carefully placed into patterns. Some form circles around burial areas. Others create triangular or oval shapes. But the most famous are the ship-shaped stone settings. Long outlines of stones arranged like Viking ships. Even today, standing among them feels eerie. The Vikings depended on ships for nearly everything: travel, trade, war, exploration. Their ships carried them across oceans to England, France, Iceland, and beyond. In Viking belief, ships may also have carried the dead into the afterlife. That idea gives Lindholm Hoje an almost haunting atmosphere. The dead resting inside symbolic stone ships, waiting for a final journey no living person could see. Archaeologists discovered that many graves at Lindholm Hoje were cremation burials. Bodies were burned before burial, and ashes were placed carefully inside the grave areas. Cremation played an important role in many Viking and Germanic traditions. Fire was not simply destruction. It may have been seen as transformation, a way of releasing the spirit from the body. Imagine the ceremonies that once happened here. Funeral fires burning against the dark northern sky, smoke rising into the wind, families gathering around stone outlines while flames consumed the dead. The smell of burning wood mixing with the cold sea air. Then afterward, ashes placed carefully into the earth while stones marked the grave forever. It must have been both beautiful and terrifying, and yet Lindholm Hoje remained hidden for centuries. That is another strange part of its story. For a very long time, the burial site disappeared beneath drifting sand. Wind carried layer after layer across the hill until the graves vanished underground. In a way, nature sealed and protected the site from destruction. Without that sand, farming and construction may have erased the graves completely. Instead, the hill slept quietly beneath the earth. Then archaeology woke it up again. When excavations began in the 20th century, researchers uncovered one of the largest and most remarkable burial grounds ever found in Denmark. Grave after grave appeared beneath the sand. Stone formations emerged almost perfectly preserved. Suddenly, the lost hill of the dead returned to history. And with it came endless questions. One mystery involves the different grave styles found at the site. Not every burial looks the same. Some graves appear richer and more elaborate than others. Certain burials included objects like jewelry, tools, weapons, and household items. Others were simpler. This suggests social differences among the people buried there. Some may have been powerful warriors or wealthy families. Others may have been ordinary villagers. But even simple graves received care and ritual attention. That detail matters because it reveals something deeply human about Viking society. Death connected the community. Burial rituals carried meaning far beyond simple disposal of the body. At Lindholm Hoje, memory itself became part of the landscape. Another mystery surrounds the ship-shaped graves. Historians still debate exactly what they symbolized. Some believe the shapes represented actual ships carrying souls into the afterlife. Others think they reflected status and identity, showing the buried person's connection to seafaring life. But there may be something even deeper. Ships represented movement, journeys, crossing from one world into another. In Norse mythology, death was rarely described as peaceful rest. It was often a journey filled with uncertainty. Warriors hoped to reach Valhalla, Odin's great hall. Others may have believed in different realms connected to gods, spirits, or ancestors. The ship shapes at Lindholm Hoje may reflect these ideas of travel after death. And perhaps that is why the graves still feel emotional today. Because even after 1,000 years, people can still recognize the fear behind them. Fear of death, fear of being forgotten, fear of whatever waits beyond life itself. One of the most unusual discoveries at Lindholm Hoje involved evidence of entire communities living nearby. Archaeologists found traces of settlements connected to the burial site. Houses, workshops, and daily objects revealed that life continued close beside death. Children played near the hill. Families cooked meals nearby. Craftsmen worked while funeral rituals happened within sight. The dead were not separated far from the living world. They remained part of it. That connection between life and death feels very different from many modern cultures, where cemeteries often stand apart from daily life. At Lindholm Hoje, the ancestors stayed close, watching over the settlement from the hill above, and the hill itself may have held sacred meaning long before Viking times. Because the burial site contains graves from different eras, some experts believe the location remained spiritually important across generations. New communities continued returning to the same place century after century. Even as traditions changed, the hill stayed connected to burial rituals. Why? No one knows for sure. Perhaps ancient people believed the land itself carried power. High places often held spiritual importance in old cultures. The view across the water may have added symbolic meaning too. The horizon between sea and sky can feel mysterious even today. Or maybe the answer is simpler. Maybe families simply wanted to remain close to their ancestors. That human desire has existed across every civilization in history. Still, some details at Lindholm Hoje remain difficult to explain. Certain graves contain unusual arrangements of stones and burial goods. Some cremation remains appear carefully sorted and organized after burning. This means funeral rituals were not random. They followed traditions people understood deeply at the time. But those traditions are mostly lost now. The Vikings left stories and myths, but they did not leave detailed explanations for every ritual. Archaeologists must piece together clues from ashes, stones, and objects buried underground. Sometimes those clues create clear pictures. Other times, they create only mystery. And Lindholm Hoje contains plenty of mystery. There is also the question of identity. Who exactly were the people buried here? The Viking world was larger and more connected than many imagine. Traders and travelers moved constantly across northern Europe. Lindholm Hoje may have included people from different regions or backgrounds, connected through trade and migration. The Limfjord nearby linked important routes through Denmark, bringing outsiders into the area regularly. Some individuals buried here may have traveled incredible distances during their lives, across rough seas, into foreign kingdoms, through wars and trade routes stretching far beyond Scandinavia. Then, eventually, they returned to this hill overlooking the water, returned home to die. That possibility makes the graves feel even more personal. Every stone shape marks a life once filled with hopes, fears, struggles, and memories now completely gone. And yet the hill continues, speaking in silence. One especially haunting detail is how many graves there are, hundreds spread across the landscape. Walking through Lindholm Hoje today creates a strange feeling because the scale becomes impossible to ignore. This was not a small burial ground used briefly by one family. This was a major place of death and remembrance, generation after generation buried here. The sheer number of graves suggests the nearby community survived for a long time despite harsh northern conditions. Viking life was not easy. Winters were brutal. Disease, war, and accidents were common. Yet people endured here for centuries, until eventually the settlement declined. Historians believe drifting sand and environmental changes may have damaged farming and daily life in the area. Slowly, the land became harder to use. Communities moved away. Over time, the Hill of Graves disappeared beneath sand while the living world changed around it. But the dead remained, waiting beneath the earth. When modern excavations uncovered the site, the preservation shocked researchers. Stone patterns remained visible after centuries underground. Cremation graves still contained ashes and objects from the Viking world. Suddenly, Lindholm Hoje offered a direct connection to a vanished age, and perhaps that is what makes the site so powerful today. It does not feel distant. It feels human. The Vikings are often shown in movies and stories as fearless raiders shouting in battle, but Lindholm Hoje reveals another truth. These were people deeply concerned with memory, ritual, and the mystery of death. They built careful monuments for the dead because they feared forgetting them. In that way, they were no different from us. Every grave at Lindholm Hoje once mattered deeply to someone: a son, a mother, a friend, a warrior, a child. People stood on this hill crying beside funeral fires, long before modern nations even existed. They placed stones carefully into patterns because they wanted remembrance to survive time itself. And somehow, it did. More than 1,000 years later, the shapes still remain, the wind still moves through the stone ships. Rain still falls across the ancient graves. The Limfjord still stretches beside the hill, just as it did during the Viking Age. But the voices are gone. The names disappeared long ago, and that silence creates the final mystery of Lindholm Hoje. How much of human history vanishes forever, even when the monuments survive? We can see the graves, we can study the ashes, we can guess at rituals and beliefs, but we can never fully hear the stories buried beneath those stones. The hill keeps them hidden, quietly, patiently, as it has for more than 1,000 years. In the middle of Denmark, between two massive burial mounds, stand two stones that changed the history of an entire nation. At first glance, they may not look as impressive as giant castles or enormous temples. But these carved stones carry messages from more than 1,000 years ago, and the deeper people study them, the more mysterious they become. These are the Jelling Stones, often called Denmark's birth certificate. But they are far more than simple monuments. They are symbols of power, religion, family, and transformation from one age into another. And hidden inside their carvings is the story of a king trying to reshape the Viking world forever. The village of Jelling looks quiet today. Green fields stretch across the landscape, and the atmosphere feels peaceful. But during the Viking Age, this place stood at the center of royal power. Kings ruled from here. Ceremonies took place here. Massive monuments were raised here to send messages that would survive long after the rulers themselves were gone. And somehow, they did. The Jelling Stones were created during the 10th century, at a time when Denmark was changing rapidly. Viking society was caught between old beliefs and a new religion arriving from Europe. The old gods of Norse mythology still held power in people's minds. Odin, Thor, Freya, stories of Valhalla and fate shaped daily life. But Christianity was spreading northward, carried by kings, missionaries, and political alliances. The Jelling Stones stand directly at the center of that collision between worlds. The smaller stone was raised first by King Gorm the Old in memory of his wife, Queen Thera. Gorm is remembered as one of Denmark's earliest kings, though much about his life remains unclear. His stone carries a message honoring Thera, showing how important memory and family were even among Viking rulers. But it is the larger stone that truly changed history. That stone was raised by Harald Bluetooth, the son of Gorm and Thyra. And yes, this is the same Harald Bluetooth, whose name inspired the modern wireless technology we use today. Engineers chose the name because Bluetooth technology connected devices together, just as Harald was known for uniting Denmark. But Harald's real story is far stranger than most people realize. The larger Jelling Stone is not simply a memorial. It is a declaration of power, a giant public message carved into stone for everyone to see. On it, Harald claims he united Denmark and Norway and made the Danes Christian. That sentence alone changed history, because it tells us something enormous was happening during Harald's rule. The Viking world was transforming, and Harald wanted everyone to know he was the man responsible. The stone itself is remarkable. Unlike many earlier Viking carvings, the larger Jelling stone contains detailed artwork and Christian imagery mixed with Viking artistic styles. One side shows a great beast twisting across the surface in the traditional Viking style. Another side contains one of the earliest images of Christ found in Scandinavia. That combination feels almost surreal. Old Viking art beside Christian symbolism. Two belief systems sharing the same monument. It is like watching two worlds collide in stone. Some historians believe Harald used the monument as political propaganda. Christianity was spreading across Europe, and becoming Christian helped rulers build alliances with powerful kingdoms to the south. By publicly declaring Denmark Christian, Harald may have been strengthening his political position as much as expressing religious belief. But religion was never simple during the Viking Age. Many people likely resisted these changes. For generations, Norse gods shaped Viking identity. Sacrifices, rituals, and myths connected people to their ancestors and traditions. Suddenly, a new religion arrived, demanding different beliefs and different ways of living. That kind of transformation creates tension, and the Jelling Stones may reflect exactly that tension. Some experts think Harald carefully mixed Christian and Viking imagery to make the transition easier for his people. Instead of completely destroying old traditions, he blended them together visually. The carvings still feel Viking, even while carrying Christian messages. If true, that reveals something fascinating about Harald Bluetooth. He may have understood that changing a nation's beliefs required more than force. It required symbols, stories, monuments, and perhaps that is why the Jelling complex became so massive, because the stones are only part of the mystery. Around them stood enormous burial mounds and a large wooden church. Archaeologists also discovered traces of giant ship-shaped stone settings and huge wooden structures nearby. The entire area appears carefully planned, almost like a royal stage designed to display power. Imagine arriving at Jelling 1,000 years ago. Two giant mounds rising from the landscape, huge carved stones standing between them, a church nearby representing the new Christian faith, royal buildings surrounding the site. Everything carefully arranged to create awe. This was not random construction. It was a statement. Harald Bluetooth wanted people to see Jelling and understand immediately that Denmark was changing under his rule. Yet even with all the research done here, many mysteries remain. One of the biggest questions involves the burial mounds themselves. Archaeologists discovered that one mound may originally have contained the remains of King Gorm, but strangely, evidence suggests his body may later have been moved into the church after Christianity arrived. That detail changes everything. It suggests the royal family itself was caught between old Viking burial customs and new Christian practices. Imagine moving a dead king from a pagan-style mound into a Christian church because beliefs had changed. That is more than a burial decision. That is an entire civilization transforming in real time. Another mystery surrounds the massive ship setting once found at Jelling. Archaeologists believe enormous stones originally formed the outline of a giant ship around the monuments. Ship settings existed elsewhere in Scandinavia, but the size at Jelling appears extraordinary. Why shape the royal complex like a ship? The answer may connect deeply to Viking beliefs. Ships were symbols of travel, status, power, and possibly even the journey into the afterlife. The royal family may have wanted to connect themselves to ancient traditions, even while embracing Christianity. Again, the old world and new world appear mixed together. And nowhere is that mixture clearer than on the larger Jelling stone itself. The image of Christ carved there looks unusual compared to later Christian art. Instead of appearing weak or suffering, Christ seems strong and almost warrior-like. The figure blends naturally with Viking artistic style. Some historians believe this was intentional. A softer or weaker image may not have appealed to Viking culture, which respected strength and courage deeply. By presenting Christ in a powerful form, Harald may have been making Christianity easier for Viking society to accept. If true, it shows remarkable political intelligence. Harold was not simply importing a foreign religion. He was reshaping it for his own people. And perhaps that explains why the Jelling Stones feel so modern in a strange way. They are carefully controlled public messaging. Every carving, every symbol, every monument appears designed to influence how people understood power and identity. The stones are ancient, but the strategy behind them feels surprisingly familiar. Another fascinating mystery involves the craftsmanship itself. Creating the larger stone required serious skill. The carvings are detailed and complex, especially considering the tools available during the Viking Age. Experts still debate exactly who carved the stones and how long the work took. These were not rushed monuments. They were masterpieces, and they were meant to last. That desire for permanence matters deeply. Harold Bluetooth ruled during dangerous times. Rival kings, political struggles, and changing beliefs created constant uncertainty. Yet through the Jelling Stones, Harald carved his version of history directly into the landscape. More than 1,000 years later, we are still reading it. That alone is extraordinary. But perhaps the most haunting part of Jelling is what it represents emotionally. Think about the people living during this transformation. Children raised hearing stories of Thor and Odin, suddenly learning about Christ. Warriors watching churches rise where old sacred places once stood. Families changing burial traditions followed for generations. An entire culture shifting beneath their feet. The Jelling Stones stand frozen inside that moment of uncertainty. They are not fully pagan, not fully medieval Christian. They exist between worlds. And maybe that is why they continue fascinating historians today. Because they capture something universal about human history. The fear and confusion that comes when old beliefs begin fading and new ones take their place. Over the centuries, Jelling survived wars, weather, and political change. The stones remained standing while kingdoms rose and fell around them. People continued protecting them because even later generations understood their importance. Eventually, the site became recognized as one of the greatest historical treasures in Scandinavia. Today, the Jelling monuments are part of the UNESCO World Heritage List, recognized for their importance to world history. But standing there today still feels strangely personal. The stones are not enormous compared to modern monuments, yet their presence carries weight. The carvings connect directly to real people who lived during one of the most dramatic transitions in Northern European history. You can still see the runes carved by Viking hands, still see the image of Christ blending into Norse art, still stand between the giant burial mounds where kings once shaped the future of Denmark. And the mysteries never fully disappear. How many people truly accepted Christianity willingly? How much resistance did Harold face? Did ordinary Vikings see the Jelling Stones as symbols of hope, fear, or royal control? And perhaps most importantly, did Harold Bluetooth truly believe the religious message he carved into stone? Or was it mainly politics? That answer may never be fully known, because monuments always tell the story rulers want remembered. But they rarely reveal every truth hidden underneath. The Jelling Stones still stand in silence today beneath the Danish sky. Wind moves across the ancient mounds just as it did 1,000 years ago. Visitors walk between the stones, reading words carved during the Viking Age, words meant to survive beyond death itself. And somehow they did. Kingdoms vanished. Beliefs changed. The Viking world faded into history. But the stones remained, waiting quietly through the centuries, still carrying the voice of a king determined to reshape his world forever.